Hey, it's Pastor Justin here with another Snapshots from the Bible. 'Tis the season, it's Advent, and our thoughts are turning a lot to Christmas trees and the Christmas story. And one thing that always kind of strikes me anytime we hear the Christmas story recited or we go to Christmas pageants is that we're very willing to include the wise men, which most likely happened like 2 years after Jesus was born. But 8 days after he was born, when he was presented in the temple, there's this whole magnificent tableau that happens that we don't tend to talk about, study, or even include in Christmas pageants as much. And it's kind of a shame because it's some of the most profound things that are said about the Messiah who's now here. And I wanted to read a little bit of that today from Luke 2, verses 29 through 35. And we're looking at a guy named Simeon here. There's a guy named Simeon had been waiting for a long time. The Holy Spirit had told him that he would not die before he saw the consolation of Israel, before he saw the Messiah. An immense promise. Like if somebody told you, before you die, you're going to see one of the most incredible things you'll ever see. So every day he's getting up, he's waiting for it. And one day he goes in the temple, and in the temple courts comes this mom and this dad carrying a little baby, and he knows right away. The Spirit tells him, "That's it. That's the one. Go right over there." Verse 28 says, Simeon took the child in his arms. The stranger comes up, takes the baby in his arms, and then he says, "Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in sight of all the nations, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel." I'm going to stop there for a second. So he has this prayer, this praise, this even a psalm to God right here. And not only is he praising God for his keeping true to his promise, not just to Simeon, but to all of Israel. I think it's very notable that here, that in verse 32, he says that this child, not just for the glory of Israel, but he's a light of revelation to the Gentiles. And this is really interesting. Throughout the whole Bible, you see the chosen people, they get this mentality. The Israelites get this mentality that they're the only ones who will ever be saved. They're the only ones God gives his word to. They're special. They are set apart. In one sense, they are. They are very much set apart. And they are very much special. And they are given the word first. They are given the Messiah first. But they are not the only ones. And they struggle with this all the way through Acts. The early church was struggling. How do we incorporate the Gentiles? Are the Gentiles even allowed in the church? But you see throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament, and prophecies like this, that God always intended the Messiah to not just be there for the Jews, but also the Gentiles, also people like us, right? And here we have a light of revelation that we talked about in this prophecy we're looking at in Isaiah 9 this month, that Jesus is initially described as a light, that the people walking in the darkness have seen a light breaks, a dawn breaks, this light. And what does light bring? It brings clarity. You see a lot better in the light than you do in the dark. You see things as they are. It brings understanding. And that is what Jesus does. That's one of his missions, is to bring understanding to the people who follow him and worship him. Okay, so let's go on to verse 33 here in Luke 2, verse 33. The child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, "This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too." And again, going back to Isaiah 9, we read that this will be a sign to you. A child will be born to a virgin, and he will be called Emmanuel, which is God with us. And so here's Simeon saying, this sign that we are finally given, this sign that's in our presence, people will speak against him. People will deny who he is. People will refute him and just run away from him, even though he's a sign in our midst. And he will also cause the falling and rising of many in Israel. So that's a bit of a cryptic phrase. What does that mean? So everybody who encounters Christ will do one of two things. There's no middle ground here. They will either rise in glory to join him and follow him, or they will fall. They will fall away from the Son of God himself. They will either love Jesus or they will hate him. He's such a divisive figure, even to this day. Jesus Christ is not somebody you can just waffle in the middle about. And then finally in verse 35, he speaks of a sword piercing the heart of Mary. And this is, of course, speaking of the cross. That one day, the mother of Jesus will look up at her son dying on the cross, not just for her, but for all of everybody's sins. Something to keep in mind is that while Luke did not know Jesus Christ in person, he interviewed a lot of people who did. And because of passages like this, we're pretty positive that he interviewed Mary. He knows a lot about what Mary said, what she was thinking, and here I gotta imagine that he's interviewing Mary long after the crucifixion and the resurrection, and she just goes, "Man, I remember that day when he was 8 years old, and I was holding this tiny little baby, and this guy came up to me and told me one day my heart would be pierced watching him die." And it came true. But also after that, he, of course, came back to life. Just some thoughts as we look at Luke 2. And I also encourage you to continue on in that passage in your own devotions. Look at what the prophetess Anna also says in that temple court. Just an incredible day. A little bit more dialogue than you get from the innkeeper. That's what I'm saying. Have a great week. God bless you.